Join us by the fireside for our evening tales of true life's strange experiences with things that lie beyond the veil of the known and into the misty depths of the mysterious and unknown. The Wolfman. I'm an experienced outdoorsman kind of guy, and I'm very experienced in camping and hiking and in hunting and just general survival. I'm very familiar and used to wildlife, and I was charged by what I believe was a cryptid called a dogman. It charged me and my cousin. It was not a bear. A bear cannot move how this thing did because, it just moves so fast and it just had a way of moving that is not normal. And it was not a normal wolf, as they can't comfortably run on two legs. Whereas this thing that charged us seemed quite natural doing that, running on two legs. I can explain a little bit further the story. So it happened in June or maybe July of 2007. I was about 17 years old and I was kind of cocky back then and still, somewhat knowledgeable of the outdoors though. My family used to own a cabin in northwest Wisconsin, and I basically grew up there in the summer. I knew the woods really well, but at night it was wise to stay in the cabin, or at least by the bonfire and by the beach, because of bears, wolves, or cougars. One of the creepiest things that happened while I was there was if you were having a bonfire, the tree line, for example, was visible from the fire pit and the beach. And at night, you always felt like you were being watched from that tree line. But during the day, the woods always seemed pretty normal and, not creepy really. But that was until this incident happened. So this happened somewhere between noon and 2 p.m. My cousin and I were having an airsoft battle. I was in full woodland camo, and he was not. I retreated onto the ATV trail into the woods for a tactical advantage, and our battle took us about 200 meters into about a third of the way up the trail. We had enough at this point, and we were standing at the edge of a clearing on the trail talking, and he was maybe about 10 feet from me, when I decided to mess with him. I shushed him and said, "We're being watched." He froze. Then I realized the woods were dead quiet, and I got spooked and started scanning the tree line and the other edge of the clearing from left to right when I saw it. Its teeth gave it away. It was panting and staring at my cousin. I don't expect you to believe me, but what I saw was a wolf as big as a black bear, at least 300 pounds, but it wasn't normal. This wolf was on two legs, crouching next to a tree, with its arm grasping the tree, grasping with clawed hand. It had a kind of reddish-brown fur. I turned to my cousin quickly and I said, "We have to go." And the next thing I know, he is sprinting, and I look back at the wolfman who had locked on and sprinted a few steps on 2 feet, and then I turned and ran. When it looked like the wolfman was dropping to all fours, it charged us and sounded right on our asses, barreling through the brush, but for whatever reason let us go when we broke out of the tree line and headed for the cabin. It was like it couldn't go past a certain point for whatever reason. What stuck with me the most about this, seeing this thing, was the sheer size that it appeared at. It seemed to be probably about 7 foot tall when it was upright. And where it should have had front paws, it appeared to have large clawed hands. Now, I'm not sure how to explain it away rationally. I have heard wolves with occasionally, kind of walk upright, but as far as I know, They can't sprint on two legs, nor do wolves get that big, and black bears more kind of waddle on two legs. The closest description is that it was a werewolf or a dogman. That's the only thing I could think of. And I wasn't doing drugs, wasn't even drinking or anything. I was pretty sober. So, this thing was just terrifying. And to this day, I wonder what would have happened if, it had caught up with us. Would we have been found dead in the woods the next day, torn to pieces? I don't know. It's just terrifying to even try to think about it. Well, from what I've heard, it sounds like there have been quite a few sightings of dog-like humanoids or wolf-like creatures, wolf-like cryptids, kind of humanoid cryptids or whatever, werewolves, I don't know. So it just kind of makes you wonder why, what are these things doing there and why that particular part of the country? Just fascinating, isn't it? The man with the brown jacket. I grew up in Michigan, Detroit, and at an early age, both myself and my brother started seeing ghosts or things that we couldn't quite explain. But when I was in middle school, things really started to get weird. One night, I woke up and I couldn't fall back to sleep. So, as I lay on my back, staring at the dimly lit ceiling from my nightlight, I felt my stomach turn and I looked out my bedroom door. My door was always open and I could see partially into my parents' room. And I thought one of my parents was coming out of their room, but instead it was a tall 6 to 7 foot man with a brown jacket and a brimmed hat, and he was walking straight towards me. Well, it was more like he was gliding, but I put my head under my covers and I screamed for my parents. The light came on and they asked me what happened. But when I told them, they just chalked it up to it being a nightmare. Well, this happened about 4 to 5 times more. And my mom started to believe me, but my dad wasn't really convinced that the brown jacket man was real. When I started high school, my dad had put two additions on our house, a huge back room and an entire second floor. Me and my brother shared the second floor during high school. The main big room was our bedroom, and we had a walk-in closet, bathroom. It was here where we had the scariest encounter of our lives. Our beds sat about 4 to 5 feet off the floor, and our room at night glowed a dark blue from our ceiling fan's blue light. And one night, I was lying there trying to sleep when I heard the voice of a man, but it sounded kind of like it was sped up and that it was playing backwards. I had heard this before with other encounters in our home, but it was coming from our closet bathroom, and that's when I heard my brother say, "Dude, do you hear that?" I was so relieved that he was awake, but I couldn't believe he heard it too, so I replied, "The voice that sounds like it's talking backwards?" "Yeah, I hear it." We both sat up in our beds, and the voice kept talking. We then started to hear footsteps with the voice, which was now pacing back and forth. Then the door handle started freaking out. I'm getting chills just, writing this and rethinking about this whole experience. So I leaned over my bed rail so I could see the door handle shaking. My brother looked as if he was going to jump out of his bed and run down the stairs. But then the door opened and I instantly said, "What do you see?" Because the way my brother's bed was positioned, he could see right into the closet, but he said he saw nothing in the doorway. And then slam! The door whipped shut, and he jumped out of bed and turned on the lights. We finally got our courage up, and we opened the door and checked both the closet and bathroom, but nothing was in there, and the voice had stopped by then. We thought maybe it was one of our cats. We were just trying to come up with answers, I guess. But nothing was in there, and the windows were shut too. I got back in my bed, and my brother stood next to me, and we talked about what the hell just happened when I suddenly noticed something out of the corner of my eye. I was looking at my brother, but he noticed it too because we both turned to look at the same time, and this white cloud looking thing just shot under our futon, and we both just froze. We didn't know what to do. We looked under our futon then, once we, pulled ourselves together, but once again, there was nothing. We stayed up for a couple of hours that night discussing what happened, and we still discuss it to this day. As time went on, the door handle would occasionally just flip out again, and the door would open and slam. Some of my friends witnessed this as well, and me and my brother saw the Hat Man a couple of times in the early morning, just standing in the middle of our room. Dad would tell us, "Why would there be ghosts upstairs? I just built it. Why would it be haunted?" My mom, however, finally believed us one day as I stayed homesick from school, and we were watching a movie in the family room, which was right under me in my brother's bedroom, and we heard the closet door fly open upstairs, and something ran across the room and then ran back to the closet, and it slammed closed. My mom turned her head to me and she freaked out. "What the hell was that?" she said, and I just replied with, "See? I told you." Other things were often heard too. I would often hear, a little girl laughing or talking, and she would even say my name from time to time. One time she whispered, "Hi," into my ear as I was laying on my bed one morning. My brother and I had a theory that ghosts were connected to this old baseball bat that was found in my parents' closet. When they first moved in the house, it was a dark red wooden bat that had the year 1901 on it. We still have the bat, but my brother has since sanded it down and made it smooth, which I didn't agree with, but he did it anyway. We moved out of the house in late 2000s, but the Hat Man followed, and so did some activity. No reverse talking ghosts, though. Sometimes I thought of ringing the doorbell and asking the new family that lives there if they have experienced anything. The last time I saw the man in the hat was a few years ago, maybe 2012 to 13. I was experimenting with lucid dreaming and astral projection, and one night I awoke with sleep paralysis. And sometimes I wouldn't see anything during sleep paralysis, and other times I would see shadow people or this black thing sitting on my chest. But this time, the man with the hat was at the foot of my bed, and he had two children with him, one on either side. Both of these kids looked like they were, from, a long time ago, the way they were dressed. They were dressed as if they were maybe from the early 1900s. One was a boy, maybe around age 10 to 12, and he had an old-looking suit on. And the other was a little girl in a white dress, and she was probably about 6 or 7 years old. And I instantly thought, that's the girl that said hi. And then they just vanished. Well, it makes you wonder if that baseball bat, if that's what these, entities were connected to somehow. What was it used for? Maybe hurting someone, killing someone? Where did it come from exactly? And be interesting to find out its history or just the history of the place there, where your house is built and so on. Um, I'm sure that would give a lot of clues as to what happened and why these souls are still there hanging around. Pretty scary. Two scary, bizarre stories. These two incidents both happened in New Mexico and roughly about the same place, actually. I was driving from Belen to Mountain Air. There's a long, almost an hour, of straight flat road called Becker Flats. Becker Flats has kind of a local reputation for weird stuff. Drug smugglers land planes on the highway there. Strange animals are spotted, UFOs, and there's a ranch called Mountain Shadows off the flats that has a lot of rumors about it that I'm sure are probably not true. But, it's just your basic satanic panic kind of stuff. Still, in 1990, I was driving across Becker Flats about 9 p.m., and all of a sudden, I see this ant about the size of a shoebox run out into the road. It was very clearly an ant. It had 6 legs, 3 body segments, and antenna. It was just about 14 inches long. I was going about 70 miles an hour with the high beams on, and it stopped when the light hit it, and I didn't have time to swerve. Both front and rear tires hit it, and the car lifted up rather than crushing it, making a tremendous noise like I had gone over a speed bump at 70 or something. It scared the hell out of me. I don't know what that was all about or where this thing came from, but it was unnatural. Another time in that same area, this happened about maybe several months later. I was in the same kind of area, and it was right after sunset. It was about 7 o'clock. The spot where this occurred was at least still a 30-minute drive from my destination, Mountain Air, where I lived. I passed a guy walking on the side of the highway in the same direction that I was going in. This was really unusual to see a pedestrian that I slowed down to get a look at him. He was a Native American, I think he was Navajo, with long hair that was in a bun. He had a red bandana tied around his forehead like a sweatband, and he was wearing jeans, blue t-shirt, and this old army field jacket, just kind of OD green with no camouflage pattern, like Vietnam era kind of stuff, with lighter sections on the sleeves where there clearly used to be 3 stripes, like a sergeant. He was wearing black pointy-toed cowboy boots and a silver concho belt. I thought, huh, that's odd, and kept driving. When I got to town, maybe half hour later or so, I passed the Mountain Air Cantina on the main drag, and the same guy was pulling open the door to walk inside. The speed limit on the drag is 30, so I was going very slow and could get a good look at him. Exact same bandana, belt, boots, and jacket. As I crept past, he turned and looked right in my eyes, and he held the gaze until I was gone. No other cars had passed me on the way to town, and even if he had hitched a ride right after I saw him on the flats, there was no way he could have gotten there first, unless he was in a plane. I told some friends about it in case they knew the guy, and they said I should be careful for a while, because I had been marked by a skinwalker. I thought, what the hell? It's kind of weird. But I asked a couple other guys I knew who were Navajo and Zuni about the guy and told them what I saw. And they said the same thing, and I hadn't even mentioned to them, what the other guys had said. Except they also said to never mention it again. A haunted forest. There was a time, maybe about 10 years ago, where I was backpacking in northern Pennsylvania. I tell this story often, and each time I tell it, honestly, I just get shivers running up and down my spine. It's really had such an effect on me. So it was late one night while I was sitting around the fire, and I heard this unfamiliar noise. At first, I thought it sounded like a small child or a baby giggling. I was completely alone in the Black Forest, so I can't imagine a child just, being out there all alone in this, forest at night. Nothing else happened for about an hour, perhaps a little bit longer. And then, when I just kind of, I had let my guard down, I guess, um, and all of a sudden, I heard this older woman laugh. It was almost as frightening as the witch's laugh in Snow White, although it was kind of short. It was very noticeable and very clear. No more than 10 seconds later, I then heard this demonic laugh, but much longer this time. And this was worse, much, much worse. So I tried gathering my awareness. I jumped up, I grabbed my hatchet and knife, and I was ready for anything. However, I wanted to curl up into a ball and just cry. I really did. I can't explain this, but it was so terrifying. And this was not something that I knew how to defend myself against. I was all alone. What was I going to do? With my body covered in goosebumps and in a state of terror, I couldn't even think about sleeping in my tent that night. I waited another hour. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't go anywhere. I was too scared. So all I did was just sit by my fire, because somehow the fire gave me some kind of sense of comfort and safety. And I just drank coffee. And I tried to stay alert as much as possible, because I was just afraid that if I fell asleep or something, that I would never wake up. Something would happen to me. So I just sat there by the fire, because that's all I could do, and that's where I felt safe. But nothing else happened. Finally, I did end up going to sleep for about, 2 hours, and I didn't hear anything else. The next morning, I gathered my things and set down the trail. Roughly an hour into my hike, I noticed a small cottage near a small pond. This cottage was white with green shutters. The windows were boarded up and didn't seem to be inhabited for a long time. I wondered, did this cottage have anything to do with the laughing? Was something living in that cottage? What was that noise that left me petrified that night? After scoping around the place for a short minute, I just kept hiking, only to be met with rain. After hours of miserable rain, I decided to cut my trip short and head out of the woods. I was picked up by a local who had taken me back to my car. Whatever that was that night, it was definitely not something human. It was something supernatural, something unexplained. And I will never forget it, because it still, like I said, it still sends shivers down my spine if I ever think about it or talk about it. Well, that definitely sounded like something was out there. Maybe more than one, perhaps. It's kind of hard to know, but whatever it was not good. Just really, I get a sense of relief that whenever I read these stories and and I know the person's safely gets out, of course, otherwise they wouldn't be able to tell the story, right? And I just get this sense of relief about that, that you got home safely at least.